So someone a while ago told me that Richard Dawkins had responded to me. And I was like, oh, okay, right, cool. Another big name person responding to me. J.K. Rowling's gone for me a few times. Um, Sometimes can be stressful. But then they were like, oh, he seems to just be babbling. I was like, oh, yeah, okay, sounds like Richard Dawkins. But then I couldn't find it. And someone very kindly sent it to me. So here we go. I haven't watched this whole thing. We've just seen a bit of it. Let's let's see what Richard Dawkins has to say. Hopefully the volume on this will be good. So this is responding to an old clip of mine from, I think, the Transatlantic call-in show. $5 from Bixie. Why the rise in transphobia? Is it a visceral fear of messing with sexuality, emasculating men? Me thinks the lady doth protest too much. To some extent, there's this term of like gender distress, and people with more conservative views of gender are more likely to suffer from gender distress, where they feel like they're not meeting some ridiculous ideal of how a man or a woman should be in their mind, and that causes them distress. And seeing other people not meet that rule or break that rule and stuff also distresses them. And then they kind of project that out onto other people, and it causes men in particular to be more sexist, and probably women too, but I'm sure it's related to transphobia.
Not quite.
So, I don't like that lipstick choice for me, gotta say. Anyway, here I am making an argument about like why conservatives seem to be stressed by trans people more, and why people who want a stronger binary gender roles in society seem to be more transphobic. And I think it should be kind of obvious, but it's obviously not obvious to a lot of people. There are some people who really strongly believe that there should be two genders and it should be a hierarchy, and when they see people not fitting into those things, they get distressed. I just explained it. I don't know if I did the best job of explaining it, but hopefully that was clear. Let's see what Richard Dawkins has to say in response to that discussion about conservatives' view of gender roles.
Sure what that person was saying.
That person?
The fact is that looking at the whole of the animal and plant kingdoms, the male-female divide is quite clear. Females produce large gametes, eggs. Males produce small gametes, sperms. There are no...
Right. Okay. So we're not talking about gender roles at all. We're now talking about biology in the plant and animal kingdoms. This isn't even the same topic as what I was talking about. To be clear, I was talking about, like, even if you ignore trans people, there are some people who are stressed about feminine men and masculine women. Like, this is where homophobia comes from as well, or at least part of homophobia. And it's where part of transphobia comes from. And where kind of even ignoring LGBT people altogether, it's where the, like, policing of women comes from. And also the policing of men. And this kind of like, you have to be a manly man or a super feminine woman. This is all the same thing. I wasn't talking about sex or gametes or gonads or anything at all. I certainly wasn't talking about the plant kingdom. When he first started there saying across the animal kingdom, I was like, oh, okay, maybe he's going to talk about gender roles in baboons, because I know there has been studies in showing how there is actually homophobia in baboons, and they do performative gender roles to some degree. Also in bonobos, which are a closer relative of ours, they don't. So in some animals, there seems to be some kind of gender performance beyond just differences in behavior based on sexual dimorphism in behavior. Anyway, let's keep going. We'll see what he has to say anyway.
Intermediates, literally no intermediates. Every creature, every vertebrate, let's say, is every mammal, every vertebrate.
Pick one, man. Every mammal is a vertebrate, yes. Not every vertebrate is a mammal, you know, like some fish. Um, like, transphobes always want to generalize, and then they realize they've generalized too much, and then they pull it back, and then they're not sure, and then let's see. I think he settles with vertebrate. Let's just go back a little bit.
Is quite clear. Females produce large gametes, eggs. Males produce small gametes, sperms. There are no intermediates, literally no intermediates. Every creature, every vertebrate, let's say, is every mammal, every vertebrate, and actually every animal is either a producer of big gametes or small. There are some hermaphrodites that produce, have both kinds of gametes and produce both, but I think.
So there are absolutely no intermediates, but also there are some who do both. Also, there are some who do neither, and there are some species that he just went with all animals, I think was the group he's describing then. There are plenty of animals that reproduce only asexually, so there's some that can reproduce sexually and asexually, like aphids, which are super cool. But yeah, there are some that, like when we're talking about the sex of an individual, there are some that produce sperm, and there are some that produce ova, for sure. And then there are some that produce both, and then there's some that produce neither at any stage in their life cycle, like normally. For example, in ants, there are some types, some morphs of ant which produce sperm and some which produce ova, and the majority of them never produce any gametes at all. But we still say they are female, despite them never producing any gametes. And there are some also that produce one type of gametes at one point in time, and then another type of gametes at another point in time. And there's never a time when they're producing both at the same time. However, there is this dead zone in the middle where they are producing neither. And at one point somewhere along here, in real life, in actual non-science denial transphobe land, sex isn't just gametes, and there's a whole collection of properties here, including gametes and chromosomes and gonads and genitals and all this kind of stuff. And during the sequential hermaphrodite sex change, all of those will change slowly over time, and you can't really say exactly where they've changed sex, but the sex change process takes part over some amount of time, because sex isn't binary, and they go from one state to another through a whole series of, like, an infinite amount of indeterminate middle states. But according to the gender critical worldview, there's only male and female, and it's a strict binary, and they go from not producing any. They go from producing one type of gamete to producing the other type of gamete, and suddenly at some point here there's a switch that just clicks, and they go from being male to female at an instantaneous moment in time, faster than, like, that information now travels across their body faster than the speed of light. Just completely nonsense position. And maybe when they go through a section, like, sorry, there's so much to add here because it's just so complicated. If there is an individual which is going through a sequential hermaphrodite sex change, and all of their sex characteristics change, including their gonads, etc., and then they just never produce gametes, if you were to look at one and pick one up, you would say, this is an example of a female of this species. However, because you don't know if they produced a gamete, and then if you look at it, maybe it's never produced a gamete, so would you then declare it a male, even though it was typically female? However, there are some which can go in both directions, so when you pick up one, you don't know whether it started as female or not, so you actually don't know whether it's male or female, and you can't make that declaration at all in the gender critical land. However, in real life, you could do. Complete nonsense. This guy's meant to be a biologist, by the way.
I think that person was being misled by just talking about humans, which is so small.
That person, that's me.
Females produce large gametes, eggs. Males produce small gametes, sperms. Every amount.
I jumped too far back.
Is either a producer of big gametes or small. There are some hermaphrodites that produce, have both kinds of gametes and produce both. But I think that person was being misled by just talking about humans, which is only one species out of millions.
Yeah, I mean, I was being misled by talking about humans when someone called in and asked about conservative ideology. and why gender roles in humans are relevant to politics. Yeah, definitely misled by. I mean, why bother? What when someone calls in and they're like, "Katie, tell me about why conservatives are more likely to be sexist and transphobic and homophobic." I'll be like, "Well, what we're going to do is talk about all vertebrates. I mean, all mammals. I mean, all vertebrates. I mean, all animals." Uh, cool stuff, mate. Good stuff.
And I think it's very clear that the male-female divide is as clear a divide as we have, as clear a binary as we actually have in.
You literally 10 seconds ago, mate, were talking about how there are also hermaphrodites. What are you doing? Why have you turned into this? I know a lot of people. Sorry, let me finish what he says before I go off on a Richard Dawkins rant.
Biology, almost everything else in biology is a continuum, but
that's interesting. So everything in biology is a continuum, apart from the one thing that is politically relevant to conservatives. Okay. That's pretty suspicious, isn't it? I'm sure that it's just that even though you earlier gave an example of how not all individuals are either male or female, I'm sure it is just a binary. It's the one single binary that exists in nature. Is this one thing that happens to be relevant to conservatism in 2025?
As we actually have in biology, almost everything else in biology is a continuum, but the male-female divide is totally clear, totally unambiguous. It is a binary.
Yeah. That was a short response. He didn't actually respond to anything I said. He called me that person. And then he said a load of nonsense that is scientifically false. How we can say it's that clear? Like, yeah, I just want to get these. I want to I don't actually want to trap these people because it'd be kidnapping. I would just love to be in a situation where I'm in a room and I'm like, here is an example. I'm going to describe to you an example of an organism, or here is an example of an organism. It doesn't have any gametes. Which of the two binary sexes that you're claiming exist is it? We can do any tests you like. Tell me, how and why are you sexing this animal or this plant? And then just, there are so many examples that they just will not be able to do. Or they'll be like, oh, well, okay, it doesn't have gametes, but it has gonads. So, shut up, OBS. It doesn't have gametes, but it does have gonads, so we're going to sex it based on which gonads it has. Okay, so why are you saying that it's just down to gametes when in this case it's down to gonads? So that means what happens in the situation when one fish changes sex from one to another? You're saying the sex change takes place when the gonads change, but the gonads don't change in a binary way. They go through an ovotestes phase. So there's clearly not only two states here. So where are you drawing the line in this occasion? And you can't draw it based on gametes because you were just saying it's based on gonads in individuals without gametes. And then what happens if this individual doesn't have gonads either? Now what are we doing? You saying it's down to hormone levels or something? And if that's the case, why is that not true for humans? They cannot do it. They just keep saying clarity. It's like Keir Starmer with the Supreme Court ruling. They just keep saying clarity, and then when you ask them to clarify it, they just stop talking. That's the end of their argument. They just say, it's clear, it's a binary. Okay, cool. What about this situation? Oh, wow, exceptions don't count. Hashtag exceptions don't count. What are you talking about? What's happened to Richard Dawkins is what I was going to say earlier. Maybe nothing's happened to him and he's always been like this. I was probably naive of him as a person beyond he wrote a book and I was an atheist and he was an atheist. I've never read The God Delusion. I know it was quite influential. I know a few of my atheist friends said it was good at the time I remember when it came out. Was he just a conservative loser at that point who was prepared to be a science denier? His field is biology, right? That's what he's famous for. And yet now all of a sudden, when it gets into a political area he doesn't like, he just does not want to touch the biology. He's like, I'm making a declaration, I'm not going to defend it. I can't defend it. End of conversation. And I'm saying what happened to him. I know that he has had this, there has been accusations in the past that he has misogynistic views, that he has anti-Islam views. And I think recently he said he was culturally Christian. He's obviously, today at least, a right-wing conservative. And that's affecting his views on the world, to the point where I don't think you could describe him as a skeptic. Maybe he never was. Like, some people are atheists, and that's it. That doesn't mean anything. All that being an atheist means is you aren't convinced of the claim that there is a God. That if you don't believe that there is a God, then you're an atheist. And that doesn't mean that you're more intelligent. It doesn't mean you're more rational. It doesn't mean you're a skeptic. It doesn't mean anything. There are stupid, horrible, hateful, ignorant, irrational people who are atheists. And there's no atheist ideology. It's literally a lack of one single claim belief. So, fair. But I know that he was promoted as some kind of atheist intellectual, and by other people who are sometimes promoted as atheist intellectuals. And he obviously wrote this influential book about, presumably taking a skeptical position on religion. I guess I'm probably projecting my own views onto this, because I think that being a skeptic is like my core value. And so what a skeptic is someone who looks at the evidence and changes their mind accordingly. And I think a lot of people like to imagine they're that, but I think unless you actively pursue that, unless you make that one of your core underlying things that you're constantly addressing, it's so easy not to do it, because you believe there's loads of bullshit you believe just because you grew up being told it. And if you've never taken real time, energy and effort to confront it, why would you change your position on it? Unless you're come face to face with some evidence that contradicts it. And there are plenty of positions that I've had to address in my lifetime that have really turned my worldview upside down. And one is religion. I used to believe in God and I don't anymore. Another is gay rights, which those two things came together where I realized that my position was homophobic and homophobia was bad. When I was 14 or something. And then I addressed skeptically the feminist position, and I came to the conclusion that as a skeptic, someone who's committed to approaching evidence and changing their worldview, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's a complete 180 to what you believe, that feminism is the only rational position. And then that eventually led me to trans rights, and that's where I sit today. There are other things that I've changed my position on, and sometimes it's horrible when you believe something. Not even you passionately believe something, but when something is a default position of yours, and then someone comes along, another one that I've changed my position on is veganism. I am currently not a vegan, but I think that that's an immoral position. I think that veganism is the only moral position to hold. And all I can say is I don't have as good morals as I could and should. But that's a position that's quite uncomfortable for a lot of people, because most people aren't vegans and most people aren't brought up to be vegans, and it's just such a default. Everyone around you eats meat all the time. And then as a skeptic, you have to approach this in a skeptical way and have some underlying positions. Is animal suffering worth my enjoyment in eating something different? And you just have it's really not nice to do these things. And it's the same wow, my position was homophobic. I was homophobic when I was younger. I said horrible things about gay people. That's a horrible realization to have. But that's the reality of being a skeptic, and it's the only way you can, well, it's not the only way you can come to better positions, but it is a reliable way of coming to better positions if you're consistent and you work hard on it. I just don't think you could call Richard Dawkins a skeptic, at least not on trans rights. For some reason, his mind has turned off and he is incapable of approaching the position of trans rights skeptically, and therefore now biological sex skeptically. If he wasn't embroiled in, like, he obviously doesn't like trans people. He's signed the Women's Declaration International, whatever it's called, the WDI Declaration, which is calls to completely remove all trans people's rights. He's proudly supported Kathleen Stock and J.K. Rowling, and like he isn't just a bit anti-trans or a bit of like a grumpy old white man or whatever. He is gender critical, like full on. But yeah, if he approached biological sex, if he wasn't gender critical, then he'd be like, oh well, yeah, it's not just a binary. It's not just you can't categorize humans or any other animal just neatly into a binary. Like, it just cannot be done. And yet he every now and then he walks up to the edge and he's like, oh yeah, there are also individuals who don't. Oh well, exceptions don't count. We'll steer clear of that. Yeah, it's weird to see, but I think some people are like blind to it. If they're doing it. Do you think you would be able to do that if you considered yourself to be a skeptical person and to change your mind based on evidence, which I think probably most people think they do, and then you were presented with a piece of evidence that didn't fit with your worldview? Would you be able to stop and change your mind? It's very difficult, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, and there's other things which maybe I haven't done it enough. Like, you see, I've recently seen some clips of people going up and saying things like, oh, do you think books should be banned if they're explicit? And then this, like, Republicans in America, and they're like, yeah, of course. And then they read them out a quote from the Bible, and they're like, do you think this book should be banned? And they're like, yes, it sounds horrific. And then they're like, it's in the Bible. And then their just demeanor just changes, and they just suddenly now they're like defending the Bible mode, and they're out of banning book mode. And like, they almost turn into a different person on the spot. Or they read out a thing and say, here's a recent quote from Joe Biden. They're like, wow, is he stupid? Like, this person should be in jail. He's a criminal. And they're like, oh, no, sorry, I didn't mean Biden. I meant Donald Trump. And they're like, nope, suddenly they're back into cultist mode. Like, do you think you could notice yourself doing that? I don't know. It's so weird. I know some people don't value internal consistency or rational views. I just think someone like Richard Dawkins probably does. He probably does see himself as a rational person who changed their mind based on evidence. He probably sees himself as like a scientist, and he just observably is not in this case. That doesn't mean he isn't on anything else. Like, maybe some people do have specific things they're irrational about. Like, they're a scientist until it comes to like ghosts, and then all of a sudden, when you talk about ghosts, their mind just switches into another realm, and they don't need evidence, and like, they don't need everything to be material and the supernatural is real. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's so weird. But I feel like Richard Dawkins, at least at this point in his life, is at first a conservative, and at second, whatever else. And if the conservative position clashes with the skeptical position or the atheist position or the biologist position, then fuck it. Doesn't matter anymore. Good times. Anyway, so he didn't really respond to me. He kind of responded to something else, but with me there, with not very good lipstick on. Let's hope he responds to me in the future. Or maybe he responds to... It just gives us an actual binary definition of sex which doesn't have exceptions. That'd be nice.